and then it dims my screen. I can live with that.
Monitors, huh?
Yeah, that was it. So, next topic, object-oriented programming. We started talking about this yesterday. We started modeling a Nike shoes, right? Okay, and we threw up a word cloud of all the things we could think of associated with Nike shoes, and then we kind of modeled that. What is kind of the main attributes? Where would there be like an object under Nike shoes, like the sponsor maybe, with several pieces of information, their first name and last name, so on. That kind of modeling, that's an entity, what we would call an entity. So in the world of Nike, you would have your products, that's an entity. You'd have your customers, that's an entity. These are their major tables, the names of the tables, you could think of it as entities. Your manufacturing plants, that would be an entity. Distribution channels would be an entity. Okay. Another thing you can do with this domain modeling is to model your problem. Model the lab tonight. Model last night's lab. So think about the problem that you're given. You're being given something. Here's the assignment. Here's a story and some acceptance criteria. Your objectives. You start putting out a word cloud around that problem. We had a fruit stand. We needed to create a list of fruits that we could display on screen. If you just boil it down to the user story, is show me a list of fruits on. As a user, I want to see the list of all fruits so that I can pick one to eat. And so that was our problem. So we started working that. I need to create a list of fruits. They have their individual attributes. I need to process. So you're just thinking through the problem, right? It's not the entity like we did with a shoe. It's a problem, but the problem has characteristics. And so you start writing word clouding those and start seeing how do they relate to each other. This will help you drive where you're going with solving the problem. So back to entities, though, we constructed it with an object literal, except for our demo this morning had constructor, and that's what we're going to now. You saw with the object literal, if you had 20 fruits, that was going to get kind of cumbersome, huh? Yeah. Typing all that up like that. And you had if you had like the cell function on your fruit, like I illustrated a little while ago, you're ending up repeating that all over the place somehow, or maybe you can't even do it if you do it in this array. It won't work like that, or you have to go to array prototyping. We're going to do some of that. So it gets cumbersome. So a constructor is a way that you can define fruit. A fruit has a name, it has a color, it has an image, it has these properties, and it may have some methods. So one time you declare this is what a fruit looks like. This is the fields of, if fruit was a table in your database, and it would have fields, right? So in this context, we talk about its properties. It's an object and it has properties. It's a fruit, it has properties. We can declare that once and then call that definition to construct a fruit for us. And we just give it the values we want for the different properties. But we don't have to completely redeclare the actual definition. So here is a declaration of a user. It's only got one property, name. And I'll talk about this. Is this the best one with this? So it's got a name property. I think you guys are familiar with prototype, which I was pretty surprised at, but is everybody, did you get a class on prototypes at all?
I read about it a little.
Your little rating. It seemed like you had some knowledge about it.
Briefly.
Yeah, so this has to do with this inheritance thing. So you make a string, you declare a variable that is string type. It inherits all of these things from JavaScript's basic constructor for strings. It's a constructor for strings, and JavaScript says strings have, you might have a length for, well, let's pick arrays, because there's a lot more you can do with arrays. Array has a length that if you create an array variable, it's got the property of length as a method. You can see how many elements are in there. As we go more into arrays, there's methods like being able to add a thing to an array called push, or pop something off called pop. So you could do my array.push parentheses new thing, and it pushes it on, puts another element on. It has these methods that deal with arrays that helps you find things. It's got methods for pulling one element out of the middle of the array, or deleting an element or two elements out of the middle of the array called slice or splice, things like this. We'll get into more of that. So the way that happens is this thing called prototype. And so prototype is just where you put your methods on something, and it inherits. And it's if you have a data type that has prototype methods attached to it, when you use that data type, like array, and create a new variable, you're instantiating an instance. These are terms that you don't have to get too into. We'll be reviewing these more and more. But so you're creating an array, and it's inheriting all these prototype methods, like length. Okay? So this is a way you can add a method to, we're declaring our own thing. This isn't coming from JavaScript like array. We've declared something called user. It's got this property called name, but we're adding to it a method called say hi. Okay? This name.
We have to put the arguments in the, like yesterday, if we were doing a constructor and we were going to put like, fruits equals or whatever, and then within the parentheses, do we have to type like name, comma, price, comma, function, comma, whatever?
Line 9. Oh, I think this is where you're defining user here.
Right.
We are updating user with a method, and we put those in prototype.
Right.
That's just a kind of convention, just live with it. And now we're actually creating a user. This line 9, we're creating a new, see the uppercase too? This is a key thing. This is where we're not using camel case in JavaScript. When we're creating constructors, these are objects that we create. And you use these things in a special way, so the uppercase is just an indication to us, oh, that's a constructor.
Right. So
okay?
Specifically on that example in line 1, or the lower example in line 3, when you're declaring the constructor, when you're using the constructor, whatever it is, that name in parentheses. So in line 1 of that example, where it says function user and then parentheses name.
Yes.
If I had a number of key value pairs, do I have to enter all those, or is that just informational at that point?
No, you do. Yeah, it's going to be name, comma, age, comma, sex, comma, address, comma, phone number, and then there's going to be this sex equals sex, this.
I think the only exception to that would be is that you can create a constructor where some of the values are going to default to something, so you don't we might a little bit.
Right. If it's not a property, if it's a default.
So if you like have like, I don't know, I'm thinking like, you start, like it's representing like a D&D character, well they all have to start with a certain length, right?
Okay, correct.
You don't have to like, declare each character, you don't have to say I want to start with like
Only things that you're setting dynamically. Yeah. So if there's some defaults that you're just accepting, our fruit stand inventory defaults to 0. When you first create a fruit, we don't have any, let's say, until you start adding inventory, you harvest.
Is there a way to set a property as a constant where it's not changed?
Say that again? Sorry.
So is there a way to set a property as a constant where it can't be changed?
No.
No, they're all.
I'll have to think about that. We'll get back to you on
Well,
that.
like for the key, that's always that number, right? The key.
The key value pairs, yeah, but the keys are to get to the value. You get to the values. The record is the values. The keys are the names of the fields. If that's what you're referring to, key value
The key
pairs.
is like the index, this like specific key or key number for that particular record.
Oh, the key, the ID, the
Yes.
GUID.
That will not change.
That doesn't change, but can we force in JavaScript to not let code change that? I'd have to look that up. What's your question?
I'm a little confused about the prototype. So you have a constructor named user,
Mm-hmm.
and within that constructor, couldn't you also put to create that method that's on line 5? Couldn't you also put this dot say hi equals and then blah 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 function alert this thing to create the method within the constructor? So
Yeah.
what's the benefit? Because that's how I've seen an example.
Inside this kind of form, maybe, yeah, probably.
So I'm
Yeah,
confused what
I'm going to have a hard time getting into the deep where you're trying to go here because we never use these patterns in real life. so I never use this stuff. I mean, I learned it like a while back, and it was like the one day in code school, and it was like, bye.
So does the prototype, so then user.prototype on line 5, if you try to do user.sayHi equals function, would that break?
It won't inherit. It won't inherit. Yeah, well, because you're putting a method on user and it's not an inherit. Prototype is, I'm putting stuff that's going to be inherited.
Okay.
So every time I create a user, it's going to inherit these prototypes.
Yeah, because otherwise
It's
you're gonna
repeatable.
use it then.
Yeah, well, you make it once, but it gets every time you create a new user instance. This is an instance. You have a definition, and then you create it, and that creates an instance of the user.
Whatever follows prototype.
And the prototypes are the ones, are those properties that inherit. And it's cascading, like cascading style sheets, like our style sheets. Parents, the prototype methods on a parent object. So you might have an object called shoe, right? And it has certain properties. You can sell a shoe, you can lace up a shoe, maybe. Or no, we don't know if you can lace it up because we don't know if this shoe has laces or not. It might be a slip-on, okay? So when there's some other properties, we might take that shoe property and create a new class that extends that shoe. So we might say running shoe. Okay, so it's going to inherit everything shoe has, but it might have some additional properties like lace up or something. Okay, you inherit the stuff from your parent, then you create another one. So this is where it gets really interesting. We have building. Building has some properties, turn on lights, open door. We might take building and extend it and call it home. Home has fireplace, you know. We might extend building in a different direction and extend it and say office. Okay? Office has different properties than home, maybe. They both inherit buildings properties. Okay? Now, I need to draw this out, or is this kind of making some sense here? It's like if you've studied science and you've got the tree of animals, you know, you're a mammal, and then you break it down to species and subtypes like that. And you extend, you inherit the properties. Invertebrates all have that invertebrate property, but then you divide it further down. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to just double check to make sure I do understand that about the constructor function up in the top, as far as like what he was asking about in the parentheses that come right after your constructor function, the name that you've given it there.
Yes, John. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, up where it says user.
Mhm.
And then, so you're putting something in those parentheses if it's going to be something that can be changed.
Yeah, you're going to call it.
What
You're going to
the-
say you can
this
have
dot name.
let user 1 equal new user John. Next line. Let user 2 equal new user
Right, because
Dave.
you're creating this constructor function so you can plug many things into it later and simplify your code,
Mhm.
simplify the process.
We saw it with the code from the fruit stand. You know,
Right.
his fruits thing, or it was the constructor, and then in app he was doing a new fruit, and then in parentheses he had apple, red, and a URL for an image,
So
and then
when
he
you
did it
create
again
red,
for
then-
orange.
As far as when you would ever not want to have anything in those parentheses as a constructor function, that's pretty rare when that happens. I mean,
You're
I think
creating-
because
you're-
generally
yeah,
you're creating a constructor
you're-
function
you're gonna
because
use
you want
this-
to be able to change stuff.
You're creating stuff that has, yes, that each instance of it has its own. It's a representation of a record. I mean, in one way you could think of it as constructor is how the record is defined. When you create new, you're saying I have a one record, and these are the field values of that record.
And it's not that, like, if you don't list an attribute or in those parentheses, it's not that it can't be changed. It's that it's not necessary to set a value at the beginning.
Right.
So if you did something like, if you had, like, something was like user and this dot alive, right? If you're entering a user, we're assuming they're alive. So that doesn't mean that at some point you might have to change that and say, oh, this user passed away. We're keeping them around for history.
Here's another
You're not gonna
example.
You don't need to enter every single
Right.
user, John, comma, alive. John,
Right.
Mark,
We could have
comma.
user, and all we know off the start, we're putting in our students. So we have constructor students, and initially we're getting them in there, and all we know is first name and last name. And then you're going to come in and fill in your profile. You yourself are going to be doing the update to that constructor, saying, oh yeah, here's my address and my phone number and stuff, and you're going to be updating that.
Okay, for that example, you enter first the new user John, and then the next one will be another user like
Mhm.
Dave.
Yep.
And then on the third iteration, can you put in another John as new user?
Sure, so long as you're assigning it to a different variable, or you're going to overwrite. It's the variable,
I'm just the line 9
Mhm.
there. So you
Mhm.
do it several times.
Yeah, you can do it as many times as you want. There's going to be multiple users named John. When we're assigning to a variable like this, we just want to have unique variables. Apple, orange, that pattern. Let's keep moving on. So this is one pattern, and right away we're going to throw it out and we're going to show you an alternative. Class. The exact same thing that happened here, this is the same exact thing. And this is where we're going. Okay? I was planning on having us like live code and do it this way today, and then finish off taking you into here. I'm not sure if that's going to be necessary with the time constraints. There's still other things to cover here today. I might just say, let's just go for class, and we've seen this, we've connected the dots, right? If I went right for this, there's no function, the word function isn't there. There's a big hole. This would be the big hole in your thinking. How did we get there? There was something that happened. So I needed to introduce you to this, but we don't do things this way. Like I say, I can't even speak to the depths of this because we never do it this way. We do it this way. We declare class. Let's go through it. Class is a keyword in JavaScript now. This is kind of new ES 2015 stuff. Sort of new, 3 years ago. User, we got a brace. We use the word constructor. And now we put in name, this name, same exact line there. Still has a semicolon. Big point of contention, what's missing right here at the end of this brace? Yeah, normally we would be thinking there'd be a comma there, right? No, not when we're using class, no commas. Okay? That'll get you. That's why I'm pointing it out. It's just an exception, you're gonna have to deal with it.
Why?
Yeah, why? Now, you know, if you were to create an object in here, it might have commas. But the constructor itself, the elements of the constructor, will not have commas. Like, if this sponsor equals an object, you know, then you would have some commas in that. But the constructor itself, the elements constructor, here's our methods. As you start listing your methods, you don't separate with commas, okay?
Quick thing. Could you pop that web address into River?
Yep.
That way we can have it on our screen. Plus, classes aren't covered in our books. I noticed, like, it's just not mentioned, so we're gonna have to rely on other resources.
That's
to
good.
do this. Yeah,
Yep.
so, yeah.
Yes, you are. I'm glad for pointing that out. That's true. Yeah, your book is kind of it's a little older. It covers things good. It definitely covers this stuff. And so read up about this, but I'm not sure it's worth our time to actually get into a big coding exercise with this when we're just moving on. I only want to introduce this to say this is the connector. So this is not black magic. JavaScript is doing exactly this. It's just made a friendlier syntax, a more readable syntax. It translates it directly into that.
And I believe it's more readable, but I can't personally read it right now.
Yeah, but it will be. It is more readable.
I'll pull it up on my screen and I'll be able to read it.
Okay, so yeah, let me Slack this, or not Slack. Slack is an alternative. You guys will to River. It's very dominant when you're out in work. It's probably going to be Slack. It's very similar. You'll be able to dive straight into Slack without any problems because of your exposure to River. This boot camp. Okay. Class. Okay, let's say hi. Let's look down. What else they got here? So, okay, so it's just condensed. It's exactly the same. They've just kind of pulled everything into one line, you know, instead of kind of stretching it out. This lines 1 through 4. You see that it's exactly the same as lines 1 through 11 here. It's just we've eliminated a bunch of white space wrapping around blank lines and line returns and just condensed it. So here's proof. Alert the user. It's true. So a constructor is a prototype, so it constructs things. I'm not sure. This is more just kind of depth for those that really want to understand how it's working under the hood. The new keyword, very important. You can't do that. When you create a constructor, it's not a function. Even when we used, it's a function, but it's a very specialized stuff. So even in this format, you can't just do capital U SER open parens, right? Or with a name. It won't call as a function like that. You have to say let variable name equal new space the name of the constructor. This line right here, it's got to be like that. That will get you. Okay. And then this is a very common pattern, getters and setters. So we're creating a method on the class user, and it's called get. And all it's going to do is give us the name. It's just going to return the username. There's this underscore, that's just kind of syntax, or just accept it, it's just there. And we're going to have a way to set things inside the constructor. So we have a way to retrieve elements from the constructor, and we have a way to set them. And we can do some validation like this. And then we set this name equals the value that came in. Let's see it in use. So we declare our new user. We can do user.name now. It has a construct, it has a getter, and we can also try, we see that we're going through validation here. The name was too short. So when we set things, we don't call set, but when we do new, it's using the setter. That's where we would put in our validation, field level validation. I need email address to have an @ symbol and a dot in it.
Is this dot underscore name the same as this dot name? Is that how we're treating it? Or is it a separate?
It's just like a syntax thing that's just like weird, but okay, I'll just have to do it. Why this thing here, the underscore?
Yeah, when you say it's weird, but it's like, is it?
Yeah, let me see if they give you, anybody will explain why there's an underscore there. It's more like, just live with it. Read up, we'll see. I don't have time to go digging for it right now, or we're going to bog down.
Sure, but just like, what does it, this dot underscore name is the exact same thing as this dot name, but it's just conventional to add it?
Convention, in the context of a get.
Okay. But when
Okay.
we read this, like, just to understand what it does, we treat this dot underscore name the same as this dot name.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll try and get back to you. I'll try and find a better source on why they did that. I'm not clear on it, but there it is. Anybody in here? Oh, here's an alternative object defined. So this is what it translates into in a lot of ways. We're not going to do code like this. We write it as class internally. Here's the operative word, internally. So they're showing you they're eliminating the black magic. They're showing you what's happening under the hood. You create a user with nothing in it and then add a prototype to it. It's a constant. Here's a constant, 5. You put it in the prototype, it's a constant. So if you had a constructor that was sort of math related, had to do with circles, let's say, class circle, what would be a constant we might want to have associated with circles?
Radius.
Radius is a formula. What would be a value that would be a constant that we would associate with circle? Pi. Yeah, damn right. We're going to use it, right? We're going to need it for our methods like radius. So we would put it in prototype, and it's not a function in prototype, it's just a named value, but it's constant. It's 3.14, da, 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 da. So that answers your question on a constant, unchangeable. So read through this. Mostly, there's a lot of depth here. We're going to avoid the depth and stay with kind of the shallow enough to get you going down the road, right? I'm showing you that there's depth there, but we're going to keep moving.
Are you gonna add it to our
I sent the,
passport thing?
yeah, I can put this on the resources. I put it in River. You guys should have it by now. It's in the, so yeah, this is a pretty good one. If I find some other ones that are maybe a little easier to read, I will definitely send them over. I'll be looking this afternoon after class, but I'd like to keep moving. Is that fair enough? I think we're at the break point again. Questions on, yeah, I know this is kind of difficult. We'll just start using it in code and then it'll start feeling like something. Okay, let's take 5. Let's take a little longer one now. You can take 10 with a little extra.
How's it going?
Good.
Excellent. Are you liking the second?
Oh man, like it. And once we figured out how to not have that thing be dim when I record, which I am still recording,